Good afternoon, it's Miss Young here again. In the last video we wrote some JavaScript, or updated some JavaScript and wrote some HTML in order to do our decimal to hexadecimal converter. And it's functional, it's not particularly pretty, and so we're going to have a look at how we can at least do some styling on this. Now again, as I said before, normally I would want to put the style in a separate document for the purposes of showing again how much the difference is between a simple console app and a HTML, JavaScript, CSS app. I'm going to put it all in the same one. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to update the main body, and I'm going to give us a font family, and I'm going to choose this font, and you can see immediately for me that looks better than it did before. You can always import a Google font if you want to do that. So we've updated the body, and what can we do now? Well, we have a section, and I'm going to give this a section an ID so that we can now start to do something with this. So I'm going to give this section an ID of input wrapper. So now up here, because it's an ID, I'm going to use a hash input wrapper, and we're not going to see a great deal of change just yet, but I'm going to say I'm going to display what's known as flex. That's going to give us you'll see there's no gap between there. If I undo that, you can see here there was a spacing. Now there is no spacing. So I can give it spacing of, say, 10 pixels, and now you can see that we have some spacing. But what I can also do, because I want to make this somewhat, I want to make it more even, shall we say, I'm going to say that we can, in terms of our display, I'm going to say that the flex, I'm going to say that we're going to justify the content, and we're going to do space between, which will now, but of course, unfortunately, that has a huge gap between the input and the convert. So how can I deal with that? Well, I have an input called decimal, so I'm going to, it's an ID again, so I'm going to go ID of decimal, and I'm going to, because I'm going to display this as flex, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say something called flex row 1, and that means take up as much space as you're allowed. And we can now see that we can now, it will automatically adapt to the size of the page to give it as much space as it needs. So that's looking a little bit more, again, just for the moment, I'm just going, rather than we having to do that, I'm going to write to a here. And so we are in the style called answer, and that's an ID. So again, we're going to say the answer. And first thing I want to do is I'm going to say the text align of center, which makes it a center. I'm going to say that the font weight is bold, and I'm going to say that the font size, I don't know, I'm going to try 32 pixels. Again, in the real world I wouldn't use 32 pixels, but that is about right. So we're a little bit closer to where we want to be. In fact, that's much nicer than it was already, but I want to just do and go a little bit further. So this decimal, which is the inputs, I'm going to say that the padding, and we want to say the padding inline, which is on the left and the right. I'm going to say 5 pixels. Change a lot, and then I'm going to say our padding block, which is the top and the bottom, is going to be, let's try this, 10 pixels. And like that. Now, of course, we could, if we wanted to, just write this as padding and it's top and bottom, so it would be 5 pixels, sorry, other way around, 10 pixels and 5 pixels, and just to save us some bytes, that does the same. And you'll notice that because we're in Flex, the height of this changes automatically, but I'd like to add to the button. Now I'm addressing the button, which will have all buttons, but because I only have one, I'm going to give this some padding in line of, I don't know, 10 pixels. That just makes it a little bit thing. And then I want to give it a border of none and an outline of none, and you'll just see that the black line around it goes. And then I'm going to give it a background color, and we're in Visual Studio, so we can go and we can just look at the ones that we want. And which color shall we have? I'm looking for a blue that is one that I think I can work with. Think about that. So let's have a look. What blue do I want? I don't want a midnight blue, that's too dark. I don't want a medium blue, that's too dark. Light sky blue is probably too light. Let's just try the light sky blue and see what that looks like. It's a little light for me because I want to change the color to be white. Yes, you see that's a little bit too light. The contrast is not very good here. So we want it darker than light sky blue. Would cyan work? No, cyan doesn't work. Let's try another one. Trying to think what would be. Here we are, Dodger blue. Let's try Dodger blue. And of course I need a colon on the end or semicolon on the end. Okay, so I like that. So now, of course, if we want to, it's very harsh. We could take the decimal and we could maybe give it some border radius of say 6 pixels. And we could do the same for the button. And it's up to you now. And so what we did do in the last lesson is try and do, let's do 42. And of course we fixed that to be 2A here. Let's just remove that back again. And let's put in 42, get 2A. Let's put in FF. And you'll see that we get not a number because we didn't want to put in FF, we wanted to put in 255, which is FF. Now, people are prone to do that, and one of the nice things about JavaScript is it actually, when we do this parse integer, it converts it to a quotes number called not a number, and there is a nice function. We can say if is none of the number, or either one of those. So now if I put in FF again, we are going to get an invalid entry. So of course the problem is that we put an invalid entry and that's become nan 2. So why is that? Somewhere we have made a mistake. Where have we made a mistake? Here. Well, clearly in a text, if it is nan, and of course the reason is because we did not return from here, so it was carrying on regardless. So now if I hit that, we get that, whereas if I enter 255, it works just fine. So it's not the most pretty application, but it is slightly more pretty than when we first started out. But what have we done now? We've added all of this styling, and it's still not particularly pretty, but we have in fact this button. I'm going to give this a line of 20, I think. There we go. It's still not particularly pretty, but even to make it not this pretty, we now have all of this extra styling. We've had to add these IDs to the markup, and all in all, it's a lot of work for replacing these 4 lines of code. We now have all of this style, all of this markup, this extra JavaScript, this extra JavaScript, and this extra JavaScript, just to replace those 4 lines of code. And so that, of course, is why if you're doing something like AQA and you want to ensure that you get into the top category, you need to be able to show, to be able to do something like this. But clearly from an exam point of view, clearly from a GCSE point of view, this is a lot of work, but not a lot of return. Why not just do a nice, simple console app and have effectively 20 lines versus over 90 lines of code or markup. So hopefully that's been of any assistance. I've been Ms. Young, and hopefully you'll join me again next time. Thank you.